There's a silent epidemic destroying men from within. A dark hidden wound that society pretends not to see. Have you noticed how men around you are slowly dying inside? Look closely. Behind their forced smiles and mechanical nods lies an abyss of unspoken pain. I've spent years studying this phenomenon, and what I've discovered will disturb you. The truth about male healing is far more complex than anyone dares admit. By the end of this video, you'll understand why healing a man requires not just courage, but something our culture has systematically denied them. Genuine listening. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal might explain why the men in your life seem increasingly distant, angry, or simply absent. A recent psychological study revealed something shocking. When men express vulnerability, they're subconsciously penalized by both men and women. Let that sink in. The very act of seeking healing closes doors for them. No wonder they stay silent. But there's a deeper truth here. One that Carl Jung identified decades ago, but our society has chosen to ignore. The shadow aspects of masculinity have been collectively repressed, creating a festering wound in our cultural psyche. Think about it. When was the last time you truly listened to a man's pain without trying to fix him, without judgment, without secretly thinking he should man up? The devastating truth is that most men have never experienced this kind of listening in their entire lives. Not once. The psychological damage this causes runs deeper than we can imagine. I remember working with a client, let's call him Michael. Successful executive, picture-perfect family, respected in his community. The embodiment of modern masculine success. Yet in the safety of our sessions, he revealed a truth that haunts me still. I've spent my entire life performing. I don't know who I am when no one's watching. I don't know if that person even exists anymore. This isn't rare. This is the norm. And it's killing men silently, daily. The suppression of the authentic masculine soul creates what Jung called a shadow. The disowned parts of ourselves that grow more powerful and destructive the longer they remain in darkness. When we deny men the space to be vulnerable, to be heard, to bleed emotionally without shame, we force these essential human experiences into the shadow. And what lives in shadow eventually demands recognition, through depression, rage, addiction, or worse. But there's something even more disturbing at play. Our culture has created a double bind for men. Express your pain, and be seen as weak, or suppress it, and slowly die inside. There is no sanctioned path for male healing. No wonder male suicide rates are skyrocketing. No wonder substance abuse among men has reached epidemic proportions. The system isn't broken. It's functioning exactly as designed. Men aren't supposed to heal. They're supposed to produce, protect, provide, and perish silently when they can no longer serve these functions. The true nature of masculine wounding is ancestral and collective. Jung would argue that men today aren't just carrying their own unprocessed trauma. They're carrying generations of silenced pain, of fathers who couldn't cry, grandfathers who returned from wars and never spoke of what they witnessed, great-grandfathers who endured crushing hardship without complaint, because complaint wasn't an option. This intergenerational trauma doesn't disappear. It compounds, manifesting in increasingly destructive ways. Consider this disturbing reality. In private therapy sessions, behind closed doors, away from the performance of strength, how many men finally break down and admit they've contemplated ending their lives? Far more than any public statistic could capture. And why? Because they've never been truly heard. Because the pain of continuing the performance has become unbearable. Because they've been convinced that their suffering is a personal failure rather than a symptom of a profoundly sick system. The most devastating aspect of this crisis is how it perpetuates itself. Wounded men, never having experienced authentic listening, never learn how to offer it. They become fathers who cannot hear their son's pain. They become partners who cannot create space for vulnerability. They become friends who respond to emotional disclosure with dismissal, advice, or uncomfortable jokes. And so the wound passes from generation to generation, growing deeper, more infected. What would real healing look like? First, we must acknowledge a brutal truth. Listening. Truly listening to another's pain without trying to fix, minimize, or redirect it is one of the most difficult human skills to master. It requires us to face our own discomfort, our own unprocessed emotions. It requires courage. When we sit with a man in genuine pain, we confront our collective shadow. We see reflected in him what we've been taught to reject in ourselves. Jung understood that healing doesn't come from pushing away the shadow, but by integrating it. The path forward isn't about creating better men according to some idealized standard. It's about creating space for men to reclaim their wholeness, including the parts our culture has deemed unacceptable: their grief, their fear, their uncertainty, their tenderness, their humanity. There's a profound moment that happens when a man realizes he's truly being heard. Perhaps for the first time in his life, something shifts in his eyes. A wall crumbles, a light returns. I've witnessed this transformation hundreds of times, and it still moves me to my core. It's as if the real person, long buried under layers of performance and protection, suddenly remembers he's allowed to exist. This moment is sacred, and tragically rare. The healing process for men cannot happen in isolation. It requires witnesses. It requires someone brave enough to sit in the fire of masculine pain without flinching, without offering solutions, without secretly wishing he would pull himself together. This is where courage enters the equation, not the stereotypical courage of charging into battle, but the deeper courage of remaining present with unbearable feeling. Both the listener and the man being heard must summon this courage. Yet our society systematically destroys these opportunities for authentic connection. From early childhood, boys learn that their emotional expression brings disapproval. Research shows that parents respond differently to identical emotional displays, depending on whether they believe the child is male or female. By age 7, most boys have already internalized that their tears, their fear, their hurt are unwelcome. They learn to translate all emotional experience into either silence or anger, the only acceptable male emotional expressions. This emotional conditioning happens before conscious awareness develops. It becomes the water these boys swim in, unquestioned, invisible. By adulthood, many men lack even the vocabulary to name their internal experiences. They know something feels bad or off, but cannot distinguish between sadness, shame, loneliness, or abandonment. Their emotional illiteracy becomes another barrier to healing, another way they become separated from themselves and others. What Jung might find most disturbing about our current state is how we've collectively projected our own discomfort with vulnerability onto men themselves. We claim men don't want to talk about their feelings, when the truth is, we've created severe social penalties for them doing so. We claim men don't seek help, when we've structured help-seeking as fundamentally incompatible with masculine identity. We've created the very conditions we then criticize men for responding to. The deeper psychological truth is that listeners are often unconsciously invested in maintaining male silence. When men remain stoic, we don't have to face our own discomfort with raw emotion. We don't have to develop our capacity to hold space for suffering. We don't have to question our own emotional conditioning. Male silence serves a function in our collective psyche. It protects us from confronting the full depth of human pain. But this protection comes at a devastating cost. The unexpressed emotion doesn't disappear. It transforms. It becomes the depression epidemic among middle-aged men. It becomes the rage that explodes in unexpected places. It becomes the emotional absence that children experience from fathers who love them deeply, but cannot access or express that love in consistent, nurturing ways. It becomes addiction, seeking external solutions for internal suffering. The price of our collective comfort is men's souls. Healing this wound requires a radical reimagining of how we approach masculine pain. It means creating spaces where men can speak their truth without fear of judgment or rejection. It means training ourselves to listen without immediately jumping to solutions or minimizations. It means recognizing that phrases like "man up" or "guys don't cry" are not motivational. They are weapons that inflict profound psychological harm. It means understanding that vulnerability is not weakness, but the deepest form of courage. For the men watching this, I see you. I know the impossible contradictions you navigate daily. I know the exhaustion of constant performance. I know the loneliness of carrying pain no one wants to acknowledge. Your suffering is real, and it matters. Your healing matters. And it begins with finding even one person who can truly listen, who can bear witness to your full humanity without flinching. That person might be a therapist, a partner, a friend, or it might be someone unexpected who somehow creates that sacred space of acceptance for those who love men, partners, friends, parents, children. The greatest gift you can offer is your complete presence. Not your advice, not your solutions, not your expectations. Just your willingness to sit beside them in their darkest moments without trying to rush them back into the light. To listen not just to their words, but to the silent spaces between their words, where the real truth often lives. This is not easy. It will challenge you. It will bring up your own unprocessed emotions. That's how you know you're doing it right. Jung believed that what remains unconscious controls us, but what we bring into consciousness can be integrated and healed. The collective wound of masculine conditioning remains largely unconscious in our society. We see its symptoms everywhere but rarely name its cause. By bringing this wound into the light, by speaking honestly about the impossible standards we place on men, by creating space for authentic masculine vulnerability, by learning to listen with courage and compassion, we begin not just individual healing but collective transformation. The most profound truth I've learned in my work is this: beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the armor and the performance, men possess an extraordinary capacity for emotional depth, for connection, for love. This capacity doesn't need to be installed. It needs to be liberated. It has been there all along, waiting for safe harbor, waiting for someone brave enough to listen without judgment or agenda, waiting for someone to witness the full truth of their experience and still remain present. If something in this message resonates with you, if you recognize this wound in yourself or in the men you love, leave a comment below. This conversation needs to continue. This healing needs to happen, not just for men, but for all of us who suffer under the weight of impossible expectations and emotional silence. Jung would say that healing the masculine wound is not just personal work, it's soul work. It's the work of our time. And it begins with the courage to listen, truly listen, to what has been silenced for too long.